to the record. Gentleman, Dr. Murphy. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two amendments, which are basically the same, but they are for H.R. 1582 and 2218. I'm hoping both members of Congress on both sides of the aisle will be able to support it. Last month, in a little noticed addendum to a rulemaking related to the efficiency of microwave ovens, the executive branch increased the benefits of avoiding climate change. Government and environmental regulators have now decided that societal benefits from reducing a ton of carbon dioxide equals $36 a ton. What they did was change the formula until they got a number that they wanted. That number then impacts congressional cost analysis, impacts legislation, and kills jobs. Now, it's worthy of noting that there was no public comment, there was no vote in Congress, no formal rulemaking, no discussion in committee. This little edit, the so-called social cost of carbon, means big changes in our nation's energy policy and our economy. Now, I'm concerned that the agency can change a formula until it gets the answer they want, regardless of what's sound policy of science. Now, regardless of one's positions or belief or feelings regarding carbon or climate, we have to understand this legislative issue, this constitutional issue, that this unilateral change in policy runs counter to the constitutional authority of Congress. On July 9th, the Energy and Commerce Committee sent a letter to the Environmental Protection Agency asking for information about the impact of its regulations on jobs and the economy. The subcommittee that I chair on oversight and investigation wants to understand the data, the science, and ultimately the effect of major changes in policy on the country. There is an ongoing investigation, and the EPA owes Congress a thorough answer before invoking this action, but it will take an act of Congress to do so. My amendment places the social cost of carbon on hold while the committee conducts its review of the EPA's mathematical formulas and assumptions of the social cost of carbon. So let's freeze the social carbon rulemaking until Congress can carry out its proper oversight authority and determine what the true social cost is, because right now, the social cost has recently killed 380 utility workers in southwestern Pennsylvania who will be out of work this October at the Hatfields Ferry and Mitchell's power plants because of the cost of compliance with EPA regulations. Now, I might add that's after those two power plants had an investment of nearly $1 billion in the last few years to do work to clean them up. That social cost will be the tens of thousands of boilermakers, railroaders, miners, factory workers, operating engineers, pipe fitters, electricians, carpenters, and the list goes on, but all who will lose their jobs if the EPA is allowed to unilaterally and without the consent of Congress move forward in its actions. Now, I have a particular emotional attachment to this, Mr. Chairman, not only because it affects my district, but it affects a lot of places that I worked and volunteered in when I was in college. Many of us can remember Bobby Kennedy's walk through the broken Appalachian coal towns in the 1960s to illustrate the abject poverty that families and children were living in. I've worked in those towns trying to help families hang on to some sort of semblance of hope in a hard-scrabble life. It was very tough, and too often it failed. Now, history is about to repeat itself. The EPA writes rules with no congressional oversight. Following that, the EPA takes action that leads to the closing of power plants and coal mines. First, jobs are lost by the tens of thousands, and then by the hundreds of thousands each year. So when people lose their job, we offer them unemployment compensation. They go hungry, we offer them food stamps. They lose unemployment, we give them welfare. They lose their homes, we give them public housing. They lose their dignity and they lose their pride. And, Mr. Chairman, the government has nothing left to offer. Nothing. when all these people really wanted was a job, and there's someone to pay attention to them, and someone give them the decency of sitting down and looking them in the eyes and giving them an answer. That is the social cost of the EPA. I'm determined to continue this investigation of my subcommittee on Energy and Commerce. And until that investigation is completed, I'm asking this amendment be adopted so the EPA cannot unilaterally and without the consent of Congress put in these regulations that they've made up, which will cost a lot of families their livelihood. And, Mr. Chairman, I would add their lives. Thank you.
Dr. Murphy, I appreciate you being here, and your words of your home state are true. They're also true for other states and other people and other members. And your same ideas about people who you represent is embodied well within this committee, and I thank you for being here.